Usually when you think about a business trip, there is this very comforting expectation of predictability.
Oh, absolutely. It's totally structured.
Right. You have this mental flow chart. You book a flight. You check into a highly sanitized hotel room. You sit in some air-conditioned conference room for your meetings. Maybe you review a few spreadsheets, and then you fly home.
Safe, boring, and completely routine.
Exactly. The entire experience is routine. It is an environment we have engineered specifically for maximum safety and, like, minimum surprise.
Because commerce basically demands predictability to function smoothly.
Does. But then you step into the world of high-stakes, bleeding-edge corporate resource extraction, and suddenly that comforting flowchart is just completely incinerated.
Oh, it is completely thrown out the window.
Yeah. We are looking at a corporate expedition landscape today that is, honestly, it's terrifying. We're doing a deep dive into a secret American corporate expedition from June of 1979.
And they ventured directly into the unexplored heart of the Congo rainforest.
Right. A place that has remained virtually unchanged for 60 million years. They were going in with a highly classified mission to find a legendary lost city.
The stakes were incredibly high.
They really were.
Yeah.
We have satellite data manipulation. We have cutthroat industrial espionage. We have a mountain gorilla communicating via complex sign language.
Yeah.
And quite possibly a violently deadly new species of ape.
It sounds like science fiction, but it's all based on actual expedition logs.
It does. Okay,
Yeah.
Let's unpack this. Because we are looking at real-world data and historical logs that read exactly like a blockbuster thriller. But the stakes for everyone involved were very, very real.
Astronomical stakes, honestly. And what makes this scenario so incredibly compelling is that to even begin to understand the sheer scale of what this expedition was up against, we really first have to deconstruct a massive systemic geographical misconception that almost all of us share.
Oh, the map thing. Yes.
Right, we have to talk about the Mercator illusion.
I am so glad we are starting here because when I was looking through the sources, the math on this completely shifted my perspective.
It's jarring when you actually see the numbers.
It really is. If you are sitting at home and you picture a standard map of the world, the one hanging in every elementary school classroom, the Mercator projection, Africa looks big, sure.
But not overwhelmingly big?
Right. It doesn't look impossibly big. It looks roughly the size of Greenland.
Which is a catastrophic failure of how we visualize our planet. I mean, the Mercator projection was created back in the 16th century for oceanic navigation.
For sailing ships, right.
Exactly. It's fantastic for plotting a straight-line course on a ship because it preserves angles. But to do that, it severely distorts the physical size of the land masses.
It stretches everything out of the top and bottom.
Yeah, it dramatically shrinks the equatorial regions and wildly enlarges the poles. So Greenland looks huge, but in reality, Africa is about 14 times larger than Greenland.
14 times. That is just wild to me.
Africa covers nearly 12 million square miles.
12 million. I mean, that number is so big it almost loses its meaning.
It does.
Wait.
To put it into a more visceral perspective, Africa is almost as large as North America and Europe combined.
Wow.
You could fit the entirety of the United States, China, India, and most of Europe inside its borders, and you would still have room left over.
That is, I can't even wrap my head around that.
It's nearly twice the size of South America. And because we intrinsically mistake its physical dimensions due to that map, we also completely mistake its essential nature.
Right, like what the landscape actually looks like.
Exactly. When people hear that old kind of colonial term, dark continent, they almost universally picture hot, sweeping deserts like the Sahara or, the wide open grassy plains of the Serengeti.
Right, lions and zebras in the tall grass.
Yeah.
But that is not why it was called the Dark Continent. That name had nothing to do with the desert at all.
Not at all. It was called that for one very specific reason, which is the vast, impenetrable equatorial rainforests of its central region.
Jungle.
Specifically the drainage basin of the Congo River. 1/10 of the entire African continent is given over to this single monolithic geographical feature.
That's huge.
It's 1.5 million square miles of silent, damp, incredibly dark forest.
1.5 million square miles. That is nearly half the size of the continental United States. Just total, dense, unbroken jungle.
It's basically an ocean of trees.
And the specific area we're looking at today, the Virunga region in the northeastern corner of the Congo Basin, the sources note that it wasn't even seen by Western eyes until less than 100 years prior to this 1979 expedition.
That's right. It sits perfectly at the nexus where the Great Rainforest meets the towering Virunga volcanoes right at the edge of the Great Rift Valley.
Which sounds beautiful, but also terrifying.
Oh, it is an incredibly hostile environment. Because it lacked established navigable trade routes or any obvious features of immediate interest to early merchants, it was entirely bypassed by early explorers. It was just a blank spot on the map for centuries.
Which sets up this really fascinating dynamic when we compare historical exploration to modern corporate expeditions.
Yeah, the contrast is stark.
Because the way we think about exploration is heavily romanticized, right?
Mhm.
We picture these noble 19th century explorers in their pith helmets, hacking through the brush, doing it for the pure, unadulterated glory of science and human knowledge.
That's the Hollywood version for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
But let's look at Henry Morton Stanley, the famous Stanley who found Dr. Livingstone. In 1874, Stanley set out to explore the Congo River.
And that was a massive undertaking.
Massive. It took him 999 days just to cross it. He started with a small army of 400 men, and he lost more than two-thirds of them to disease, starvation, and the jungle itself.
It was an absolute bloodbath of an expedition.
And who actually financed him? It wasn't some prestigious scientific academy. It was newspapers initially looking for a sensational story, and then it was King Leopold II of Belgium.
Yes, and Leopold's goals were unapologetically entirely commercial.
He wasn't doing it for science.
Not even a little bit. Leopold actually wrote to Stanley explicitly stating that he didn't want a traditional Belgian colony. He wanted to personally, privately possess properties in Africa.
He wanted his own private country.
Basically, yeah. He was aiming for a, quote, grand commercial scheme. By 1885, it was widely acknowledged that King Leopold possessed the Congo in the exact same way that John D. Rockefeller possessed Standard Oil.
Wow, so it was literally a corporation?
It was a private, monopolistic corporate holding. So what's fascinating here is that African exploration, even back in the supposedly romantic 19th century, had already become utterly dominated by ruthless business interests.
See, that totally shatters the illusion for me.
Yeah.
Stanley wasn't an intrepid scientist. He was basically a heavily armed corporate contractor mapping out supply chain routes for a foreign CEO.
That is a very accurate way to look at it.
So, looking at our sources for this 1979 expedition, I have to wonder, has the fundamental nature of exploration really changed at all? Or is it just the technology we use to execute it that has evolved?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying motivation is exactly the same today as it was in 1874. The acquisition of unprecedented wealth and the establishment of a monopoly.
Right. Money and power.
Always. But the methodology has undergone a massive paradigm shift. We've moved from grueling geographic discovery to rapid surgical industrial exploitation.
So less hiking, more helicopters.
Exactly. In 1979, the Earth Resources Technology Services Company, ERTS, isn't sending people into the Congo to draw a map for the sake of cartography. They are hunting for a massive, game-changing competitive advantage in the tech sector.
So they don't need a 400-man army.
No, ERTS didn't send a lumbering army that would take 3 years to cross a river. They sent a highly specialized, incredibly small team of just 12 people.
12 people against the Congo.
Where Stanley took almost a year just to get near the Virunga region, ERTS used sophisticated orbital satellites and jet aircraft, aiming to get their expedition fully on-site and operational in just over a week.
They were obsessed with this concept mentioned in the files, close of business data.
Oh, that was their holy grail.
They wanted to shrink the world down to a 24-hour cycle.
Precisely. ERTS was at the absolute vanguard of pushing a new frontier of information logistics. They were building a system where a corporate executive sitting in an air-conditioned office in Houston could request highly specific geological information from anywhere on the globe in the morning.
And then what, get it the same day?
Exactly. Have a completely synthesized, computer-transmitted report sitting on their desk before the close of business that exact same evening.
That is insane for the 70s.
They were dealing in speed. Speed was their primary weapon. But as we're about to see in excruciating detail, the Congo jungle does not care about your corporate timelines.
It really doesn't.
It operates on a 60-million-year-old biological clock, and it does not rush for anyone.
Yeah, that desperate high-speed drive for competitive advantage is what led ERTS to send this small 12-person team into the Virunga volcanic region in the first place.
Which was a massive risk.
It was. But what exactly was so valuable that it justified sending people into one of the most dangerous, unexplored regions on Earth.
This is the billion-dollar question.
This brings us to a really cool intersection of geology and computer science. The expedition was operating under something called the Blue Contract.
And this is where the technological stakes of the late 1970s become incredibly clear and frankly kind of mind-blowing.
Give me the breakdown on this contract.
So ERTS was operating under the Blue Contract, which is a very specific, highly unusual type of agreement in the extraction industry. Normally, when a mining or extraction company takes a contract to find a mineral, there is something called a unit extraction cost limit, or a UECL.
Which is just basic economics, right?
Basic economics.
Ah.
It means it is only financially viable to dig up the mineral if it costs less than X amount of dollars per ton to extract and transport it. If it costs $10,000 to dig up a mineral, you can only sell for $5,000. You don't dig it up.
Right, the flowchart logic kicks in. It's a bad investment.
Exactly, but the Blue Contract had no limit. None. The UECL was essentially infinity.
Infinity, they would pay anything.
Correct. The buyer, which was a major, unnamed American microelectronics consortium, would pay absolutely anything, absorb any cost, to get their hands on this specific material. It was practically a blank check.
And the material they were risking lives for was Type 2B nitrogen-poor blue diamonds.
Yes.
Now, when you say blue diamonds, my mind immediately goes to the Hope diamond or high-end jewelry. But the sources are very clear. These specific diamonds are utterly useless as gemstones.
A jeweler wouldn't look twice at them.
Right, because they are absolutely full of structural impurities. So why were they worth billions of dollars to a tech company?
Because of those exact impurities. This is where the physics of computation comes in. The blue color in these diamonds doesn't come from the carbon structure itself. It comes from trace amounts of boron trapped inside the crystal lattice.
Okay, boron. Why is that important?
Well, to understand why boron-laced diamonds were suddenly the most valuable substance on Earth in 1979, we have to look at the rapid, almost violent evolution of computers leading up to that exact moment.
Okay, I love this stuff. Break it down for me.
Let's trace the lineage. The very first generation of computers in the 1940s, like the ENIX, used glass vacuum tubes to control the electrical current. They were massive, taking up entire rooms.
I've seen pictures of those. Huge walls of dials and glass.
And more importantly, they generated catastrophic amounts of heat. The vacuum tubes would literally melt, shatter, or burn out every few minutes. You had to have engineers running around with shopping carts full of tubes, just constantly replacing them to keep the machine running.
So highly inefficient, extremely hot, and not exactly reliable.
Right. Then, in 1947, we get the second generation with the invention of the transistor. It was solid state, much smaller, and ran much cooler.
A huge leap forward.
That monumental leap eventually led to silicon integrated circuits, or microchips. Throughout the 60s and 70s, the entire tech industry was writing Moore's law, constantly shrinking these silicon circuits.
Making them smaller and faster.
In 1958, you had maybe 10 components on a single chip. By 1978, just 20 years later, you had 1 million units crammed onto a chip the size of your thumbnail.
That is exponential growth right there.
It was. But by 1979, the brightest minds in computer science realized they were about to hit a fundamental, unavoidable wall of physics.
The heat wall. The silicon speed limit.
Exactly. When you shrink silicon circuits down to distances that are measured in millionths of an inch, the electrons traveling through those microscopic pathways encounter electrical resistance. That resistance generates friction, which generates heat.
Right. Basic physics.
If you try to push more electrons through faster to make a faster computer, the silicon chips generate so much heat that they will literally melt themselves into a puddle of slag.
A puddle of slag. So it just turns to goo.
You fundamentally cannot make computers any smaller or any faster using standard silicon. The material itself is the bottleneck.
So what was the plan? They couldn't just stop innovating.
The projected solution for the impending 1980s tech boom was the superconducting computer. IBM and others were secretly designing ultra-high-speed computers roughly the size of a grapefruit.
A grapefruit.
To completely eliminate the electrical resistance, these grapefruit-sized supercomputers would be perpetually chilled in baths of liquid nitrogen, bringing their temperature down to near absolute zero.
That is wild. A liquid nitrogen-cooled supercomputer the size of a grapefruit. But the sources mentioned it wasn't just the computers themselves that were bottlenecking, right? It was how they communicated with each other. The data transmission lines were also maxed out.
Yes, the infrastructure was failing alongside the processors. They anticipated a critical global shortage of data transmission lines. You can only push so much electrical data through a copper wire before it degrades.
So what's the alternative to copper wire?
The proposed solution for the networks of the future was optical data transmission, using pulses of laser light instead of electrical current. According to the engineering data from the time, a single laser channel can carry 20,000 times the information of an ordinary metal wire.
20,000 times.
It's the difference between a garden hose and a river. But to build these liquid nitrogen superconducting computers and to build the optical components for these laser networks, you need entirely new materials.
Because silicon wouldn't work anymore.
Silicon shatters at those extreme cold temperatures, and it isn't optically pure enough for the lasers. You need semiconductors that can physically handle these incredibly extreme environmental conditions.
Which brings us back to the boron-coated blue diamonds. Okay, I want to try an analogy here to see if I'm tracking this.
Let's hear it.
It's like the entire tech industry was building faster and faster race cars, but they finally hit the absolute speed limit of the asphalt highway because their rubber tires kept melting from the friction.
Okay.
You can't just build a bigger engine. You have to find a completely alien, indestructible material to build the tires out of before you can go any faster.
That is a brilliant analogy. The blue diamond is the indestructible tire. The boron impurities allow it to act as a semiconductor, but the diamond structure means it can withstand intense heat, intense cold, and laser light without degrading.
So it's the perfect material. But, I mean, naturally forming diamonds are rare. Why not just make them in a lab?
Well, relying on naturally formed diamonds is wildly inefficient, so the industry spent hundreds of millions trying to manufacture them artificially. There were massive, highly funded commercial processes, the McPhee process developed in Massachusetts, the Nagora process in Tokyo.
And what did they do?
Their entire goal was to take cheap, regular industrial diamonds and artificially dope them with a boron coating in a laboratory.
But they failed, right? The sources say the failure rate was catastrophic.
Yeah. Total failure. It was incredibly expensive, the yields were minuscule, and the resulting synthetic blue diamonds were entirely unreliable under stress. They would crack or fail to conduct properly.
So the lab route was totally dead.
The artificial route was a dead end. So the only viable option left to keep the computer revolution moving forward was to find a massive, untapped natural source of type 2B blue diamonds.
And if you find that,
in the cutthroat microelectronics industry of 1979, where competitive edge was literally measured in weeks or days, finding a natural source of these diamonds wouldn't just give a company a slight advantage.
it would be game over for everyone else.
It would give them a 5-year, insurmountable technological jump on the rest of the world, a monopoly on the materials required for the next generation of computing. That kind of leverage was worth tens of billions of dollars.
Okay, so that sets the stage perfectly. Vertices is desperate. They have the blue contract with its infinite budget. They use satellite imaging to follow a trail of alluvial diamond deposits, which is basically geological panning of riverbeds leading up the lush, densely forested slopes of the Virunga volcanoes in the Congo.
Into completely uncharted territory.
And they follow this diamond trail deep into the primary jungle to a specific isolated location that the local African porters call Kanyamagufa, which roughly translates to the place of bones.
An incredibly ominous, chilling name.
Oh, for sure.
And unfortunately for the first expedition team, it was an entirely accurate description of the location.
Let's get into the destruction of that first camp, because this is where the flowchart of corporate predictability completely shattered.
Everything goes wrong almost instantly.
The expedition guide is a hardened, highly experienced South African mercenary named Jan Kruger. He and his team of local porters are trekking into this dark, eerily silent jungle canopy.
The sun barely reaches the floor there.
Right, it's basically twilight all day. And as they get closer to the coordinates, they start finding bones scattered on the jungle floor. Not human bones, but the very delicate, shattered bones of colobus monkeys.
And the local porters, who are mostly town-dwelling men from modern cities, are immediately terrified. They don't view this as a zoological curiosity.
They think it's a curse.
They blame the bones on dawa, which is a Bantu term encompassing magical, evil forces or curses. The porters firmly believe that any man who crosses into this specific territory will be met by a demon that will physically crush his skull.
Crush his skull. That's very specific.
The folklore is incredibly specific about the method of death.
But Kruger is a practical, cynical man. He ignores the folklore. He literally doubles the porter's daily pay out of the ERTS corporate budget to keep them from fleeing, and he orders them to set up the base camp right there among the bones.
Which was a fatal mistake.
But the camp is highly organized. They have perimeter alarms, they have modern weaponry, they have massive satellite dishes, and then the next morning, dawn breaks.
Time for the close of business transmission.
Exactly. As part of the protocol, the transmission equipment is set up to send a daily automated video and data feed via a satellite uplink directly to ERTS headquarters in Houston.
And it's a very narrow window to send that data.
The satellite dish takes exactly 6 minutes to lock onto the orbital satellite and establish the handshake. In those agonizing 6 minutes, the entire heavily armed camp is systematically annihilated.
The efficiency of the attack is terrifying. Kruger, who is an experienced combat veteran, is standing near the transmitter. He is suddenly hit hard in the chest by a small object thrown from the high tree canopy.
Like a rock.
He looks down, thinking maybe a heavy nut or a large berry fell on him. He picks it up. It is a freshly crushed human eyeball.
Oh my God. The detail in the report about the shred of the white optic nerve still being attached. It's just visceral nightmare fuel.
It is entirely jarring. Kruger realizes immediately they are under attack from above. He draws his weapon and runs to find his most trusted porter, a man named Mizulu.
But he's too late.
He finds them, but Mizulu is already dead. The description of the trauma is clinically horrifying. Mizulu's skull has been utterly crushed inward from both sides simultaneously.
Like a vice.
The sheer kinetic force required to do that has elongated his face, causing one eye to bulge grotesquely and the other to actually explode outward from the pressure differential.
That is just,
Before Kruger can even react, the satellite video feed shows a dark blur, and the camera is violently knocked over.
Now we shift perspective. We jump 10,000 miles away from the blood and the mud of the Congo, directly into the sterile, hyper-modern communications control room at ERTS headquarters in Houston.
A completely different world.
Enter Karen Ross. She is 24 years old, an absolute undeniable math prodigy. She was doing advanced calculus at age 10, entered MIT at 13.
She's a genius.
The corporate culture calls her Ross Glacier behind her back because she is so intensely, coldly logical. She operates completely without sentiment. She is the Arts Congo project supervisor, and it is her job to retrieve and analyze this final, garbled, static-filled video feed from the destroyed camp.
And this is where we need to take a step back and really explain the technology to understand what Ross actually does to figure out what killed her team.
Right, because it's not like she's just watching a VHS tape.
No, we have to understand that in 1979, ARTS isn't using a normal television video camera or standard photography. They aren't dealing with chemical silver salts reacting to light on a physical piece of film.
So what are they using?
They are using highly experimental, military-grade, multispectral digital scanners. These machines record the environment directly onto computer-compatible tapes. This means the images are not physical pictures at all. They are purely electrical signals.
They're just data.
They are millions of numbers arranged in a mathematical grid. And because they are just numbers, they can be manipulated, cleaned, and altered using mathematical algorithms.
Which Ross proceeds to do in a complex process the ERTS technicians call data salvage.
Yes. The raw video feed from the Congo is a mess. It ends with a dark shadow rapidly moving in front of the lens, blocking the sun, and then there is a split-second glimpse of a blurry, distorted face right up against the glass before the antenna is physically smashed and the signal dies.
Just a split second.
Ross sits at her terminal and runs 14 different, incredibly complex computer programs to clean this split second of data up. First, she runs what they call a wash cycle.
A wash cycle, like for laundry.
Basically, but for data. The computer identifies the specific horizontal and vertical scan positions of the electronic static, the snow on the screen, and Ross instructs the computer to mathematically subtract or cancel those specific lines of data.
But wait, I need an ELI 5 on this. If you delete the static lines, you are literally deleting pieces of the picture. That leaves empty, blank spaces in the image, right? Like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Exactly. You've removed the noise, but you've also created holes in your data. So her next step is a fill-in-the-blanks operation. The computer looks at the healthy pixels surrounding the empty spaces, analyzes their color and shading, and interjects imagery.
So it's guessing.
It essentially makes a highly educated mathematical guess about what should be in that empty space based on the surrounding context, and it generates brand new pixels to fill the hole.
That sounds a lot like modern AI upscaling.
Very similar concept. Once she has a solid, continuous image, she uses a fast and dirty three-space program. This algorithm analyzes the two-dimensional shadows and grayscale patterns on the blurry face, and it uses the physics of lighting to build a three-dimensional model of the flat image.
Why does she need a 3D model?
It proves that the object has real physical volume and depth, that it's not just a flat shadow. Finally, she enhances the contrast to sharpen the edges.
And the final image pops up on the glowing screen. Bright, clean, and undeniable. It is the face of a male gorilla staring directly into the lens.
A perfect, clear image.
But I have to stop you here, because reading this, my skeptical alarms were ringing off the hook.
Why is that?
If a computer is literally filling in the blanks, taking wild guesses at what pixels should be there, and stretching shadows into 3D models, how do we know it isn't just hallucinating the image?
That's a great question.
In a modern context, we just call this a terrible AI deepfake. I mean, the head of ERTS, a guy named R.B. Travis, looks at this crisp picture of a gorilla and completely dismisses it.
He doesn't buy it at all.
He tells Ross it's a programmer's artifact, a glitch, like Pac-Man bleeding into an Excel spreadsheet.
It is a highly valid critical concern. In the field of digital imaging, this specific phenomenon is known as data float.
Data float.
Yeah, it's the dangerous threshold where heavily manipulated, statistically averaged information cuts loose from objective reality and becomes an entirely synthetic creation of the machine.
Yeah,
You polish the data until it lies to you.
right. You enhance it so much it becomes fake.
But Ross anticipates this exact criticism. She proves the image of the gorilla is objectively real using a rigorous validation program called Animation Predicted Next Frame, or APNF.
Okay, how does APNF work? How does math prove the gorilla is real?
It's a brilliant test of physical logic. She feeds the computer several consecutive still frames from the start of the blurry video sequence. She then asks the computer's physics engine to mathematically predict what the next frame should look like, based entirely on the trajectory, velocity, and lighting of the moving object in the previous frames.
So it's drawing the next frame itself.
The computer generates a predicted image. Ross then takes that synthetic prediction and overlays it onto the actual raw next frame of the video.
Oh, that's smart.
If the image was just a hallucinated glitch, the physical movement wouldn't track logically frame to frame. But she does this APNF test 8 times in a row, predicting frame after frame. And every single time, the computer's mathematical prediction matches the raw data perfectly. It proves definitively that the data handling is accurate, the geometry is consistent, and the image of the ape is fundamentally, physically real.
Okay, so the math holds up. The image is real. It is a gray-furred gorilla. But Travis, the CEO, still absolutely refuses to believe it. And his reasoning isn't based on the tech, it's based on biology.
Right, he knows basic primate behavior.
He points out that gorillas are peaceful, shy, reclusive vegetarians. They eat bamboo. They do not orchestrate tactical, 6-minute military-style raids to systematically crush human skulls and smash advanced satellite communication arrays.
It's completely unheard of.
It contradicts literally everything science knows about primate behavior. ERTS is a geology and tech company. They don't know anything about monkeys. To figure out what the hell they were dealing with in the Congo, they realized they need to bring in an outside primate expert.
Which brings us to a fascinating detour into primatology. We are introduced to Dr. Peter Elliot, a brilliant, somewhat obsessive young primatologist running a research program at the University of California at Berkeley.
And he's not working alone.
No, the absolute star of his program is Amy.
Yes, Amy. I love
Yeah.
these sections. Amy is a 7-year-old mountain gorilla. And before we get into how Amy fits into the Congo expedition, we really need to dive into the history of primate language studies, because the context here is absolutely crucial to understanding why Amy is so special.
The scientific dream of communicating with our closest genetic relatives goes back centuries, but for a very long time it was considered a biological impossibility. The sources outline this perfectly.
They tried and failed for a long time.
Back in the 1950s, a team of well-meaning researchers decided to raise an infant chimpanzee named Vicky exactly like a human child in a suburban home.
Like wearing clothes and everything.
They dressed her, fed her at the table, and spent years aggressively trying to teach her to physically speak English out loud.
That seems like a bad idea.
It was a massive, tragic failure. After 6 years of exhausting effort, Vicky could only painfully, breathlessly mouth four indistinct words: Mama, Papa, Cup, and Up.
Just 4 words in 6 years.
This highly publicized failure heavily reinforced the arrogant scientific dogma of the era, which stated that humans, and only humans, possess the cognitive capacity for language.
But the cognitive capacity wasn't the issue at all. It was a hardware problem. Researchers finally realized that apes simply do not have the physiological vocal tracts required to form human consonants and vowels.
They physically can't make the sounds.
Right. You can't teach a dog to speak French because its throat isn't built for it. But an ape's hands, their hands are incredibly dexterous and expressive.
Exactly. The breakthrough required lateral thinking. In 1966, a new team of researchers decided to bypass the vocal tract entirely. They taught American Sign Language, which is a fully visual spatial language, to a female chimp named Washoe.
And it worked.
It was an absolute paradigm shift in animal intelligence studies. Washoe didn't just mimic signs for treats. By 1971, Washoe had mastered over 160 distinct signs.
That's a huge vocabulary for a chimp.
More importantly, she demonstrated true linguistic comprehension by inventing new, spontaneous compound combinations. When she saw a swan for the first time, an animal she didn't have a word for, she signed waterbird.
Waterbird. That is amazing.
When she tasted a watermelon, she signed waterfruit. She understood the abstract properties of the objects. This shattered the old dogma and opened the floodgates for massive funding and research on other apes, which eventually leads directly to Peter Elliot's groundbreaking work with Amy.
And Amy is an absolute superstar in this field. She has an active working vocabulary of 620 words.
620, that is staggering.
She isn't just asking for food. She is deeply emotionally self-aware. The sources are packed with these incredible details about her personality. She loves playing with makeup. She actively gets jealous and throws tantrums when Elliot brings his human girlfriends around the lab. And she understands deeply abstract societal concepts.
She has a very complex internal life.
The one that blew my mind was the concept of a button. We have to talk about the button.
Yes, the button anecdote is a perfect illustration of how complex her internal worldview is. When Amy was a young, juvenile gorilla just starting the program, she obviously didn't understand arbitrary human social hierarchies.
Because why would she?
Right. To her, dominance was based entirely on physical size and aggressive posturing. Consequently, she would frequently try to attack police officers or security guards who came to the campus.
Because they wear uniforms.
Exactly. Elliot realized that to Amy, the bright, shiny brass buttons on their uniforms looked clown-like, decorative, and completely ridiculous. In her mind, only a low-status, foolish animal would cover itself in shiny targets.
Oh, so she thought they were weak.
So she felt perfectly confident attacking them to assert dominance. Elliot had to sit down and meticulously teach her, through sign language and repeated exposure, that a button was actually a symbol of human authority. It meant the person possessed power.
That is such an abstract concept to grasp.
Once she grasped that highly abstract symbolic concept, her behavior completely changed. She began treating anyone in a uniform with cautious deference. She also uses what psychologists call displacement behavior.
What's displacement behavior?
When she gets furious at Elliot for making her work too hard, instead of physically attacking him, which she could easily do, she will sit in the corner and obsessively, violently shred paper into tiny pieces.
Wow, taking her anger out on an inanimate object.
It is a highly sophisticated, human-like emotional coping mechanism to diffuse her own violent impulses.
But something goes terribly, terribly wrong with Amy in the spring of 1979, right before the ERTS disaster. Her stellar progress just halts. Her behavior drops off an absolute cliff.
It's a sudden, severe regression.
Her daily word acquisition plummets to zero. She stops eating. She starts throwing massive, destructive temper tantrums. And Elliot discovers that it all stems from an unprecedented psychological event. Amy becomes the first non-human primate to ever definitively report having a dream.
And not just a dream, a recurring nightmare. She starts frantically signing to Elliot that she is having sleep pictures or bad pictures that wake her up in a panic.
But whenever Elliot asks her to describe the bad pictures, she refuses.
She covers her eyes and shakes her head. She is traumatized by whatever is in her own head. To help her cope with this intense psychological distress, the lab staff introduces her to finger painting, hoping she'll express it visually.
Art therapy for a gorilla.
Exactly. And as a great little detail, they actually have to secretly lace the finger paint with hot cayenne pepper because she keeps trying to eat the vibrant colors.
Oh man, spicy paint.
Once the paint burns her tongue enough to stop her from eating it, she begins obsessively tainting. Every single day, she paints the exact same abstract cluster of images, harsh vertical green streaks, deep black holes, and repeating inverted semicircles.
And when they ask her what she's painting, she signs that the green streaks are forest and the semicircles are old houses or bad houses.
The entire research staff is baffled. They assume it's just gibberish until a graduate researcher named Sarah Johnson is doing completely unrelated historical research in the campus anthropology library.
What does she find?
She opens a dusty volume and finds a 1642 Portuguese engraving by an artist named Juan Diego de Valdez. It is a stylized historical depiction of the legendary lost city of Zinj, supposedly located deep in the unexplored Congo.
And what does the city look like?
The most striking architectural feature of this ruined city is the ancient monolithic stone doors and windows. They are all built in the highly distinctive shape of inverted semicircles. It is a perfect, undeniable match for Amy's obsessive finger paintings.
Okay, stop the tape. This is where my brain broke reading the sources. Amy was captured by poachers in the African wild when she was barely 7 months old. An infant.
Tiny baby, yes.
She was immediately shipped to a concrete enclosure in a zoo in Minneapolis before Elliot acquired her. There is absolutely zero chance she stumbled into a university library and studied a 17th century Portuguese engraving.
Obviously not.
And it is incredibly unlikely that a 7-month-old infant gorilla retains a perfect architectural memory of a ruined city she may be glimpsed from her mother's back. So how is she painting it?
This specific mystery introduces the most profound and controversial scientific concept in the entire expedition: the theory of genetic memory.
Genetic memory.
Okay.
This theory was first seriously proposed by a naturalist named Eugene Moraes way back in 1911. It asks a deceptively simple yet mind-bending question. We absolutely know that physical traits, eye color, bone structure, free patterns, are inherited directly through the chemical sequence of DNA.
Right, genetics 101.
We also know that instinctual behavior in lower animals is hardwired from birth. A weaver bird that is hatched in complete isolation, having never seen another bird, will still perfectly weave a complex nest on its first try.
They just know how to do it. A monarch butterfly knows exactly which thousands of miles to migrate without ever being caught. The mechanism is genetic. So, Marie's hypothesized if physical instructions and behavioral instincts can be encoded in DNA, could highly specific memories, images, or environmental traumas also be inherited?
Like passing down a memory of a specific place.
Could a higher primate possess a psychic apparatus fixed from birth, essentially inheriting the memories of its ancestors?
I have to be honest, I was fighting this concept the whole time. To me, it sounds like pure 1970s pseudoscience.
It is definitely fringe.
It DNA codes for proteins and amino acids. It's a biological blueprint, not a filing cabinet for your great-grandfather's vacation photos. You're telling me a gorilla is having nightmares about the exact floor plan of a ruined city because of a sequence of nucleotides. It feels like we're stepping out of biology and into mysticism.
Your skepticism is entirely warranted, and the mainstream scientific community in 1979 would largely agree with you. It skirts dangerously close to Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious.
Right, universal archetypes and all that.
However, Elliot, desperate for an answer to his star pupil's deterioration, grasps onto this theory. He reasons that if the gorillas of the Virunga region lived in or around the ruins of Zinj for thousands of generations, perhaps the visual architecture of that specific environment, combined with some ancient trauma, became evolutionarily hardwired into their genetic code as a survival mechanism.
So they naturally avoid the ruins.
Exactly. He believes Amy's sleep pictures are a clear, undeniable case of specific genetic memory bubbling to the surface as she matures.
And whether it's pseudoscience or not, the timing is like something out of a movie. Because at the exact moment Elliot's team is looking at the 1642 engraving, realizing it perfectly matches their ape's nightmare drawings, the door to the lab swings open, and in walks Karen Ross from ERTS.
She tracks him down.
She slaps a high-resolution satellite photograph down on the table, and the photograph shows the exact same inverted semicircle ruins.
It's an incredible narrative collision. You have this massive convergence of ultra-modern billion-dollar satellite surveillance technology slamming directly into primal 60-million-year-old genetic memory.
They arrived at the same place through completely different methods.
They both found the same lost city using completely opposite ends of the technological spectrum.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Ross casually mentions to Elliot that not only is the city real, but she possesses the exact GPS coordinates for Zinj.
She knows exactly where it is.
Elliot is stunned. He asks her how on earth she found a stone city buried under 1 million square miles of impenetrable jungle canopy. And the methodology, she explains, is just brilliant. It's so smart.
It is a masterclass in lateral, out-of-the-box thinking.
Explain how she did it.
The fundamental problem with surveying the Congo rainforest from orbit is the canopy. The tops of the trees form an interlocking, impenetrable, leafy roof that perfectly hides everything beneath it from any aerial view.
It's just a solid green wall from above.
You can't see the rivers, you can't see the ground, and you certainly can't see a ruined stone city. If you look at a satellite photo, it just looks like a flat sea of green broccoli. But Ross realized that trying to look through the vegetation was a fool's errand.
So she stopped looking for the stone.
Instead, she looked at the vegetation itself. Specifically, she analyzed its albedo.
Okay, I know the word from climate science, but give us a refresher. What exactly is albedo in this context?
At its most basic level, albedo is a measure of reflectivity. It is the ratio of electromagnetic energy, sunlight, that is reflected by a surface compared to the amount of energy that actually hits it.
Think of it as how shiny something is.
Fresh white snow has a very high albedo. It reflects almost all the light. Black asphalt has a very low albedo. It absorbs the light and gets hot. Now, in the Congo, untouched primary jungle consists of massive, ancient hardwood trees that have been growing undisturbed for centuries.
The really tall ones.
Because the canopy is so thick, very little sunlight reaches the floor, meaning the undergrowth is sparse. It's actually quite open and easy to walk through at ground level. But if human beings come in and chop down that primary jungle, say, to clear a massive grid of land to build a sprawling stone city or a vast agricultural farm,
Right.
and then eventually abandon that city, the slow-growing hardwoods do not immediately come back.
Something else takes over the empty space.
Exactly. A totally different kind of vegetation aggressively fills the vacuum. This is known as secondary jungle. It is made up of fast-growing, opportunistic softwoods, dense bamboo, and incredibly thick, thorny vines. It's an impenetrable, tangled mess.
And because the physical cellular structure of the leaves and plants in the secondary jungle is completely different from the ancient hardwoods, the secondary jungle reflects sunlight back into space differently.
Precisely. The secondary growth has a completely distinct albedo signature. It reflects a different wavelength of light. And it gets even more granular. These fast-growing softwoods only live for about 20 to 50 years, meaning they are constantly dying off, decomposing, and being replaced by newer, denser secondary growth.
It's a faster life cycle.
This constant cycle of decay and regrowth alters the soil chemistry, which means the albedo signature of the plants can actually be mathematically graded by age. Ross understood this.
She weaponized the plant biology.
She went into the ODS mainframe and programmed the computers to scan 129,000 separate high-resolution satellite photographs covering over 50,000 square kilometers of dense rainforest.
That is an unimaginable amount of data to process in 1979.
It was. She instructed the computer to meticulously scan every pixel and look for an albedo difference of just 0.03, just a 3% shift in reflectivity.
Just a tiny variation in the green.
Furthermore, she told the computer to specifically search for the albedo signature of a 500 to 800-year-old secondary jungle. And she told it to look for that specific aged reflectivity laid out in unnatural geometric right-angled grid patterns.
Which would be the streets.
The unmistakable footprint of city streets and buildings completely overgrown by vines.
I love this so much. She didn't look for the stone. She used the jungle's own biological scar tissue to find the city. She mentions in the logs that if you handed those photos to a team of 50 human photo analysts, it would have taken them 31 years of non-stop work to find that 0.03 difference.
31 years.
The ERTS computer crunched the numbers and found the geometric scar in 9 hours.
It perfectly highlights the crucial difference in modern exploration between remote sensing and ground truth. Remote sensing, the satellites, the albedo signatures, can give you the map, the perfect coordinates, the sterile data.
But it's just data.
But ground truth is a military and scientific term for what actually happens when fragile human bodies step into that physical environment. The satellite brilliantly found the geometric scar of the city, but it was completely blind to the biological reality underneath the canopy.
It couldn't see the monsters.
It couldn't see or predict the violently aggressive gray gorillas waiting in those ruins to crush human skulls.
So we have an alliance formed. Elliot and Amy board this massive, incredibly expensive ERTS 747 cargo jet with Karen Ross. Elliot is thrilled. He thinks he's going on a heavily funded, purely academic expedition to test his radical genetic memory theory.
He is completely naive about the real mission.
He doesn't realize that Ross views him and the gorilla as mere tools, and that they're actually deploying as frontline soldiers in a massive, covert corporate war. Because as it turns out, ERTS isn't the only multinational conglomerate looking for this trillion-dollar blue diamond site.
That's right. There is a shadowy, massively well-funded Euro-Japanese consortium that is also hunting for Zinj. And they aren't just looking for it independently. They are actively, aggressively keeping pace with ERTS through a highly illegal, incredibly sophisticated piece of industrial espionage known as a piggyback slurp.
I have to say, a piggyback slurp sounds like a terrible 7-Eleven drink, but it's actually an amazing hack. Explain how this worked, because the mechanics of it are fascinating.
To process the immense amount of satellite data required for Ross's albedo scan, ERTS headquarters in Houston frequently had to borrow supercomputer processing power. They exchanged massive packets of data with the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland over dedicated high-speed telephone carrier lines.
So they're sending it across the country.
The Euro-Japanese consortium operatives managed to locate the physical infrastructure of these lines somewhere in the American Midwest. They physically tapped the wire and inserted a terminal link-up into the carrier line.
Just spliced right into the cable.
This hidden terminal didn't broadcast anything. It just sat there and passively slurped up a copy of every single piece of data moving back and forth between Texas and Maryland.
So they stole the satellite photos. But a satellite photo of the whole Congo is useless unless you know what you're looking for. I want to use an analogy here. It's like the consortium tapped into a municipal water pipe to steal water. But instead of just getting water, they inadvertently downloaded the master blueprints for the entire city's reservoir system.
That's exactly.
Because they didn't just steal the raw image data, they stole the metadata.
That is exactly what happened. The stolen packets included the data transformation histories. This is the critical piece. The consortium's hackers saw exactly what mathematical operations Ross performed on the raw images.
They saw the formula.
They saw the algorithm she used to filter for the 0.03 albedo difference. They saw the parameters for the 800-year-old secondary jungle. They saw the geometric grid filter.
Meaning they knew exactly how she found Zinj.
Yeah.
And by replicating her math on the stolen data, they instantly knew exactly where it was.
Yes. The consortium essentially sat back, let Ross do all the brilliant, heavy-lifting computational genius to solve the puzzle, and then they just quietly stole her completed map.
That is so devious.
This theft completely blew the ERTS timeline. Ross realizes they have been hacked, and suddenly, the carefully planned, methodical expedition turns into a desperate, chaotic, dead heat race to get boots on the ground in the Congo first.
And to win this frantic race, their jet makes an emergency stop in Tangier, Morocco, to hire a physical guide who can get them through the jungle fast. Enter Captain Charles Monroe.
Monroe is quite the character.
I love this character. He is the ultimate, hyper-competent, totally cynical mercenary. His resume is insane. He runs illegal weapons. He led squads of white mercenaries during the bloody Congolese civil wars of the 60s. He is officially designated persona non grata in half a dozen African nations, and he charges an absolute fortune.
He is not a nice guy.
But if you need to travel fast through a war zone, he is unequivocally the best man alive for the job.
And the scene where they meet him in Tangier is a perfect, chaotic illustration of the cutthroat, zero-sum nature of this corporate warfare. Ross and Elliot arrive at Monroe's opulent, heavily guarded Moorish house, fully expecting a standard business negotiation.
But they're not alone.
They walk in to find that operatives from the Euro-Japanese consortium are already sitting in his living room, actively bidding millions of dollars for Monroe's exclusive services.
It's an auction. Ross has to negotiate in real time, matching bids on the fly, eventually offering massive, unprecedented percentages of the first-year diamond extraction returns just to secure Monroe.
And Monroe is just soaking it in.
Monroe, of course, is loving this. He's leaning back, smoking a cigar, playing both sides against each other to drive up his price. And then, right in the middle of this tense dinner negotiation, the consortium decides they are done talking. Their outside operatives open fire with a barrage of Czech AK-47 machine guns, shattering the windows and spraying the dining room with bullets.
It is a stunning escalation. The consortium isn't just trying to outbid ERTS. They are fully prepared to assassinate their corporate competition on the spot. It transitions instantly from boardrooms to battlefields.
So the flowchart is well and truly gone now.
Completely. But what makes this scene truly memorable is how Karen Ross, the 24-year-old math prodigy, reacts. She is completely unfazed by the gunfire. As they are scrambling out the back door dodging bullets, she tells Monroe that she agrees to his exorbitant price.
While getting shot at.
Furthermore, she tells him he has to leave his house and come with her this exact second. Why? Because earlier that afternoon, anticipating trouble, she had her own people plant illegal, untraceable Czech AK-47s in Monroe's private warehouse, and she just tipped off the Moroccan police.
Oh, wow.
The sirens are already approaching. If Monroe doesn't agree to jump on her plane immediately, he will be arrested for arms trafficking and tied up in a Moroccan jail for weeks.
She framed him just to force his hand. I mean, this is what I mean about the flowchart burning up.
Right.
This isn't just an archaeological dig with some rough edges. This is a multinational, multi-billion-dollar military race with zero ethical boundaries.
Ross has no boundaries at all.
None. And look at how coldly Ross uses Elliot and Amy. Later on the plane, she flat out admits to Elliot that she only brought him and the gorilla along as a tactical diversion.
A decoy.
She knew ERTS was being tailed by consortium spies in San Francisco.
Oh.
So to confuse the enemy intelligence network, she visibly scooped up a university primatologist and a signing gorilla. She knew the consortium analysts would waste critical days trying to figure out how a gorilla factored into a diamond mining operation. They were literally just camouflage.
It is a terrifying level of ruthless efficiency. She views human beings as variables in an equation. But as the expedition jet finally lands in Nairobi, Kenya, the high-minded tech and the corporate espionage suddenly take a back seat.
Because they're in Africa now.
Because the brutal biological reality of the jungle finally catches up to them.
This part is so grim. In Nairobi, before they can cross into the Congo, they get a call from the local authorities. They go to the city morgue, and they find a man named Peterson on a stainless steel table.
And Peterson was part of the first team.
Right, he was the chief geologist on the first ERTS expedition, the one that was wiped out. He somehow survived the initial attack at the camp, wandered delirious and starving through the jungle for weeks, finally stumbled into a rural village, and then immediately died of massive systemic shock.
His body gave out.
The local African pathologist shows them the body and points out a bizarre injury pattern. Peterson has bilateral crushed arms.
The autopsy details are perplexing. Both of his arms were completely shattered. The bone fragmentation resembles a massive blunt force mechanical trauma, like being run over by a heavy truck or caught in an industrial press.
But there are no trucks in the jungle.
Exactly. And as the pathologist notes, truck accidents or falls rarely produce perfectly symmetrical bilateral injuries. Something grabbed both of his arms simultaneously and crushed them with unimaginable hydraulic-level strength.
What's truly terrifying, though, isn't the broken bones. It's what the pathologist scraped out from deep under Peterson's broken fingernails.
He fought back.
Peterson fought back before he died. Under his nails, they find residue, dried blood, skin flakes, and strands of coarse gray hair. The pathologist immediately notes that under a microscope, the cross-section of the hair follicle isn't human. It's primate.
So they run tests on the blood.
So they run the dried blood through an advanced electrophoresis test.
An electrophoresis test uses an electrical field to separate proteins in blood serum based on their size and charge. It generates a specific protein fingerprint. The ERTS computer analyzes the banding pattern of Peterson's attacker, and the database confirms with near absolute certainty that it is a perfect match for gorilla blood.
But wait, here is the massive contradiction. Back in the United States, in an air-conditioned lab at Berkeley, Tom Siemens, who's the computer programmer for Project Amy, is running his own analysis on the blurry gray ape face from the salvaged Houston video.
He's using a completely different method.
He is running a highly experimental program called a B8 discriminant function.
This is a fascinating foundational bit of computer science history. The B8 problem refers to the immense difficulty in early artificial intelligence and pattern recognition.
How so?
It's about teaching a computer program to distinguish between the capital letter B and the number 8. To a human eye, the difference is instantaneous and obvious. But a computer doesn't see shapes. It sees pixels and coordinates.
Just grids of numbers.
Translating the visual difference into mathematical scanning instructions is incredibly complex. Siemens applies this exact same discriminant logic not to letters, but to the morphological differences between species of apes.
Elliot basically begged him, I need a program that can mathematically definitively tell me if the creature that crushed those skulls in the video is a gorilla. So I need an ELI5 here. How does a B8 algorithm look at an ape?
It breaks the face down into geometry. How does the computer know a B from an 8? It looks for specific structural rules. A B has a straight vertical line on the left and two curved loops on the right. An 8 is a continuous figure 8 curve with no straight lines.
Right.
Siemens programmed the computer to analyze the structural rules of primate faces. He fed it hundreds of photos of known gorillas, chimpanzees, and orangutans. The computer mapped the exact ratios: the distance between the eyes, the slope of the brow ridge, the protrusion of the jaw, the density of the nasal cavity.
It ignores how big the photo is.
Crucially, he instructs the program to rely only on element morphology, the shape and ratio of the features, and to completely exclude the overall size of the animal because they don't know the focal length of the camera in the Congo.
So it's pure facial geometry.
Yeah.
And Siemens runs the garbled, cleaned-up Houston video of the gray ape through this B8 function. When he runs a photo of a normal mountain gorilla, it scores a 0.99 probability on the test, almost a perfect match.
As expected.
When he runs a chimpanzee, it fails, scoring a 0.11. The creature in the Congo video scores a 0.39.
A 0.39. It is statistically impossible for that creature to be a mountain gorilla. According to Siemens' rigid mathematical model, it is absolutely not any known species. It is a completely new, unclassified animal.
A brand new apex predator.
Perhaps a missing link, a transitional evolutionary form. Furthermore, the computer notes that the major differential causing the low score isn't just bone structure, it's skin albedo. Even analyzing the black and white video, the computer determines the creature's skin is far too light to be a known gorilla species.
So the team in Nairobi realizes, with absolute horror, that they aren't just going up against a violent troop of normal animals. They're deliberately heading into the deepest jungle on Earth to face a violently aggressive, skull-crushing, completely unclassified primate species.
It's a suicide mission.
And before they can even mentally process this revelation, the consortium strikes again right in the heart of Nairobi. While the team is distracted, heavily armed mercenaries sneak onto the tarmac, board the ERTS 747 cargo jet, and kidnap Amy.
The execution of the kidnapping is swift. They shoot the 130-pound gorilla with a specialized CO2 dart filled with Lobaxin, which is an incredibly fast-acting, heavy-duty veterinary soporific.
It knocks her out instantly.
Amy drops instantly, and they literally slide her unconscious body out the back cargo door of the plane into a waiting truck. The consortium knows Amy is important to ERTS, even if they don't know why, so taking her cripples the ERTS mission.
And this leads to my favorite Karen Ross moment in the entire story. It shows her absolute paranoid brilliance. Before they ever left the United States, Ross insisted on putting a heavy leather tracking necklace on Amy.
Which is pretty standard.
Right, but the kidnappers, who are professionals, immediately find the necklace, slice off the radio transmitter, and dump it in a moving garbage truck heading to a landfill as a decoy.
Smart move on their part.
But they didn't know about the secondary measure. Weeks prior, Ross had forcibly made Amy swallow a secondary, miniaturized tracking bug that was masked inside a daily vitamin pill.
It is brilliant, and as he noted earlier, incredibly cold. She anticipated the kidnapping of her own team member and planted an internal wire. This internal bug allows Ross and a frantic Elliot to track Amy's location from a rented Nairobi police helicopter.
They're tracking the beep over the sprawling city, and they trace the signal to a massive, chaotic scrap metal yard on the outskirts of town. The kidnappers are smart. They hid Amy's bound, unconscious body deep inside the rusted shell of an ancient red Mercedes bus, which is completely surrounded by towers of crushed, junked cars.
They understood radio frequencies.
Exactly. The kidnappers knew that hundreds of tons of jagged steel and iron would act as a Faraday cage, shielding and blocking the radio frequency of any bug they might have missed.
The physics of the scrapyard acting as a shield is sound, but they underestimated the sensitivity of ERTS's military-grade tracking equipment. Ross's receiver is sensitive enough to pick up the faint, bouncing signal echoing out of the metal maze.
So they find her.
They manage to coordinate a police raid, sweeping the yard and rescuing Amy, but while they get their gorilla back, the delay is catastrophic to the flowchart. The rescue operation costs them hours. The timeline completely collapses.
The consortium pulls ahead.
They receive word that the consortium team is already in the air, hours ahead of them, making a direct line for the Zinj coordinates.
They are losing the race. ERTS is going to lose the trillion-dollar monopoly. So Monroe, the mercenary, looks at the map and suggests a radical, highly dangerous contingency plan to leapfrog the consortium. A plan that bypasses the long, slow trek through the jungle entirely.
He wants to drop from the sky.
And this brings us to the most intense sequence yet. The parafoil drop and the absolute rules of the Congo.
Monroe's plan is borderline suicidal. He tells them to abandon the massive 747 jet in Nairobi. It's too big, too slow, and requires an airstrip. Instead, he secures a smaller, rugged Fokker prop plane.
Where are they going to land it?
They aren't. His plan is to fly illegally, without clearance, directly into Zaire's sovereign airspace. They will fly high over the dense canopy, directly over the smoking Virunga volcanoes, navigate to Ross's coordinates, and parachute out directly onto the site.
There's a massive problem, though. Zaire is in the middle of severe civil unrest, and the military government has completely closed its eastern borders. They are flying a rogue, unidentified aircraft blind into a highly militarized zone.
They get spotted immediately.
As they cross the border, the radar warning receiver in the cockpit starts screaming. They are suddenly attacked by the FCA, the Zaire National Army, who are firing advanced radar-guided surface-to-air missiles at them from hidden jungle bases.
Missiles are literally streaking up from the canopy, exploding in the air around their fragile prop plane. Ross, who has planned for electronic warfare, scrambles to the cargo door and manually deploys chaff.
What's chaff?
She hurls these compressed silver foil basketballs out the window. When they hit the slipstream, they violently unspool into a massive glinting metallic cloud in the sky.
It creates a massive false radar signature. The computer guidance systems on the missiles get confused by the giant reflective cloud, lock onto the foil instead of the plane, and explode harmlessly in the air behind them.
It saves their lives, but their situation is deteriorating by the second. At the same time the missiles are firing, the consortium, who is monitoring their flight path, activates massive electronic jammers, completely cutting off ERTS's satellite communication.
They block their signal.
They are severed from the Houston supercomputers. They are blind, deaf, and being shot at. With no safe airstrip within 100 miles and the Zaire military adjusting their aim, Monroe realizes they can't circle. He forces the entire team to jump out of the plane at 10,000 feet.
10,000 feet. Into a jungle canopy. And they aren't using normal round parachutes. They're using highly experimental automated parafoils, which are essentially steerable, rectangular, mattress-shaped wings.
Controlled by microcomputers.
Right. They have onboard microcomputers that steer them to a pre-programmed radio beacon. The visual of this jump is pure chaos. Elliot, the academic who spends his life in a cozy Berkeley lab, is completely paralyzed by sheer terror. He has never jumped out of a plane in his life.
And then there's Amy.
And Amy the gorilla is too small and oddly shaped for a standard human parachute harness. So Monroe tranquilizes her again and literally straps this 130-pound, snoring apex predator to his own chest and prepares to jump.
It's a moment of absolute unrestrained madness. There are hundreds of pounds of high-tech gear. The computers, the laser defenses are shoved out the door first, packed into these bomb-like, torpedo-shaped muslin bundles called crosslink containers.
Designed to crash through the trees.
These are specifically designed to plunge through the thick tree canopy and smash into the muddy ground without destroying the fragile microchips inside.
And I want to highlight the psychology Monroe uses on Elliot at the door of the plane. Elliot is frozen. He physically cannot make his legs step out into the void. The wind is roaring, alarms are blaring. So Monroe, holding a gorilla, leans over and screams insults at Elliot.
He is incredibly cruel to him.
He calls him a coward, he belittles his manhood, he makes it intensely personal, and then he literally, violently shoves the scientist out the open door into the sky. Later on the ground, Monroe explains this tactic.
It wasn't just him being a jerk.
No. He says he made Elliot furiously angry on purpose. He tells him that in a survival situation, it's always better for a man to passionately hate someone else than to completely fall apart from fear. Anger focuses the mind, fear shatters it.
That psychological manipulation marks the absolute, definitive transition point of the entire expedition. The moment they tumble out of that aircraft door, they physically and symbolically leave the high-tech, air-conditioned, flowchart-driven safety of the 20th century.
They drop back in time.
They plunge into the Burrawana forest, a place that operates exclusively on the ancient, unforgiving, brutal realities of the Congo. The moment their boots hit the mud, the rules of the civilized world completely vanish. There are no lawyers, no corporate timelines, no police. There is only biology and survival.
And they find out instantly just how brutal those rules are. because the deep, silent forest is not uninhabited. They land, gather their crosslink containers, and begin hacking their way through the secondary jungle towards Zinj.
And they immediately run into trouble.
Almost immediately, they encounter the region's oldest and most feared human residents, the Kigani tribe.
The encounter with the Kigani perfectly encapsulates the jarring horror of their new reality. As they are marching exhausted and covered in mud, they stumble upon a sudden clearing. In the middle of the clearing is a small, seemingly idyllic African farmhouse.
Just a normal house.
There's a chimney with a thin wisp of smoke, a well-tended garden, and normal, everyday laundry gently flapping on a clothesline. It looks peaceful. It looks like safety.
But Monroe, whose survival instincts are legendary, throws up his hand and calls a dead halt. He forces the team to drop into the tall elephant grass. They wait in absolute agonizing silence. And then the door to the farmhouse kicks open.
But it's not a family.
It's not a family of farmers that walks out. 12 tall, heavily muscled Kigani warriors emerge. They are armed with primitive bows and razor-sharp pangas, which are long, heavy machetes, and their physical appearance is terrifying. Their faces and bare chests are painted in stark, solid white clay, giving them the chilling appearance of walking, flesh-and-bone skulls moving through the green jungle.
They are an intimidating spectral sight. And as Elliot watches them, relieved that they haven't been spotted, Monroe leans over and whispers a bombshell. He casually, coldly informs the team that the Kigani warriors didn't build that farm. They just slaughtered and ate the family that lived inside it.
Ate them. Literally. We have to talk about this because reading this section, it feels so shocking, so outside the realm of normal human experience.
It is deeply shocking to Western sensibilities. And the history of cannibalism in the Congo is complex, often sensationalized, but undeniably rooted in historical fact. During the chaotic, bloody civil wars of the 60s, it was widely reported by journalists and mercenaries alike.
Was it religious?
Well, if we look historically, early anthropologists and observers noted that in this specific region, the practice wasn't always a dark, ritualistic, or deeply religious ceremony. In many documented cases, it was a frank, unapologetic, and highly pragmatic dietary preference.
The quote in the sources from the Reverend Holman Bentley in the 19th century is wild. He asked a local tribe about it, and the native man looked at him like he was the crazy one. The man simply said, "You white men consider pork to be the tastiest of meat. You eat fowls and goats, and we eat men. Why not? What is the difference?"
It was a purely protein-driven logic, and this practical view led to some truly gruesome historical realities. In 1910, the explorer Herbert Ward wrote extensively about specific, established regional markets where live captives, prisoners of war, or rival tribesmen were sold piecemeal.
Sold alive.
It wasn't a quick execution. Buyers would literally walk up to a living, breathing captive and use colored clay to physically draw lines on the person's body, reserving and purchasing the specific cuts of meat they wanted before the person was butchered.
That is horrifying.
Yeah.
That is absolute nightmare material. But the sources note that in 1979, the Kiganis aren't doing it just for protein. There is a deeper, strategic, and magical reason why they're slaughtering farmers right now.
Yes, the modern context for the Kigani ties heavily into a deeply held spiritual concept called Angawa, which roughly translates to vital magical force. The Kigani believe that a person's magical power and life essence physically reside in their flesh and organs.
So they eat them to gain power.
By consuming the bodies of their adversaries, they believe they physically absorb that Angawa. This stolen magic protects them in battle and frustrates the curses of enemy sorcerers.
But why attack a random farmhouse? Why not soldiers?
Because currently, in 1979, the Kigani are in a state of full, violent rebellion against the distant Zaire central government. The government is trying to modernize, trying to force tribes into agricultural settlements, encroaching on the ancient hunting grounds.
Ah, so the farmers are the enemy's footprint.
The Kiganis are systematically eating farmers and government loyalists to aggressively assert their ancient territorial right to hunt. It is a form of brutal, psychological, and physical pushback against modern government interference. They are sending a message written in blood.
If you are listening to this right now, I really want you to think about how incredibly jarring this is. Think about the mental whiplash Karen Ross is experiencing. 1 minute, she is standing in an air-conditioned room in Houston, calculating satellite communication handshakes to the millisecond on a multi-million-dollar microcomputer, adjusting algorithms, optimizing global supply chains, and viewing the entire planet as a manageable spreadsheet.
And the next minute.
And the next minute, literally hours later, she is lying face down in the wet mud, holding her breath so loudly it hurts, hiding in the grass from skull-painted warriors who literally eat their enemies to steal their magical powers. It is an absolute, violent collision of worlds, the 20th century slamming into the Pleistocene epoch.
And that profound collision brings us to the ultimate, terrifying summary of their current situation. The ERTS team has, technically, successfully infiltrated the Congo. Through Monroe's incredibly dangerous, improvised parafoil drop, they've completely bypassed the Euro-Japanese consortium's meticulous timeline.
They won the race.
They have leapfrogged the enemy. As they lie in the grass, they are currently in the lead in the race for the blue diamonds.
But look at the staggering cost of that lead. They are now entirely, irrevocably cut off from the massive technological safety net they rely on to survive. Their satellite communications are being actively jammed by the consortium.
Their radios are dead.
Their air support flew away. They have no extraction plan. They are marching on foot, hacking through vines in a hostile disease jungle, actively surrounded by cannibalistic tribes in open rebellion, heading toward the ruins of a lost city that is heavily guarded by an unknown, hyper-aggressive, skull-crushing primate species that the computers mathematically insist isn't even a gorilla. The flowchart is completely gone.
If we connect all of this to the bigger picture, the journey of this expedition raises a deeply important, highly provocative question about human hubris. We put so much absolute faith in our technology. We worship our satellites, our predictive algorithms, our global supply chain timelines, our ability to instantly manipulate the world from the safety of an air-conditioned room.
We think we're invincible.
We intrinsically believe that technology has elevated us, that it makes us the unquestioned masters of our environment. But when you are violently stripped of your digital armor, when the lithium batteries die, when the screens go black, and you are dropped headfirst into an environment that has perfected its own brutal biological logic over 60 million years?
Does the tech even matter?
Right. Does human intelligence and silicon actually conquer nature? Or does nature simply quietly absorb it, crush its skull, and turn it into dust?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? We started this deep dive talking about the expectation of precision in a standard business trip, the comforting safety of the flowchart. But when you step into the dark, ancient, muddy waters of the Congo rainforest, the flowchart melts away faster than a silicon chip hitting the heat wall.
It sure does.
So as you go about your day-to-day, look around at the incredible technology you rely on. Look at your phone, your GPS navigation, your instant wireless global connectivity, and ask yourself, if the lights went out, how much of that plastic and glass would actually save you in the dark, beating heart of the jungle?
A truly chilling thought to end on.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time.